I was thinking about getting a box and duct taping it under here, and every so often sticking.
Is Mark here tonight? Is Mr. Hayes here tonight?
No.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please stand for the salute to the flag led by Councilor Bear.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Recording secretary will be Cheryl Ebert, and if she would please call the roll.
Councilor Doyle?
Here.
Councilor Bounds?
Here.
Councilor Littman?
Present.
Councilor Bear?
Present.
Councilor Hamel?
Present.
Councilor Baldick?
Here. Okay. Also at the head table here this evening, we have a city manager, Scott Myers, finance director, Donna Wooderman. And that takes care of that. City proclamation, there are none. That goes. Acceptance of the minutes from the previous meeting. We had a correction made, and everybody read the corrected minutes. Is everybody fine with that? Okay, then they'll be accepted as written. Okay, now, consent and action items. There are none. Citizens' comments from matters not on the agenda this evening. Anybody out there in the audience that would like to speak to something that is not on the agenda tonight, please come forward. Nobody's moving. Okay. There are no interviews, nominations, appointments, and elections. We have just one person that is has to be put on the appointment of Gary Schmitz, selectman for Ward 1. That's on page 15. I move to appoint city Gary Schmitz to the selectman of Ward 1 for a term of 6 years, expiring in 2023.
I'll make
Have a
that.
second. Second by Ava, by Councilor Doyle. Any other comments? Hearing none, all in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Okay.
You're in. You didn't even have to come up.
Thank you very much for coming forward, and I guess you've got some support back there. Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no public hearings. There are no presentations. The mayor's report. If I could ask the city manager to bring us up to date on Mayor Engler, please.
I've had some communication with Mayor Engler. He's mostly focusing on some business and some planning for wrapping up the final couple of meetings for this council and planning for the start of the next city council. He hasn't said a lot about his health recently, but he is doing chemotherapy at this point, and last we discussed that it was basically trying to get the regimen at a point where it was working well and he was accepting of it physically, and then at that point, once they felt they had him in a good place, it was his intention to come back to New Hampshire and then continue the chemotherapy locally at that point. So I've heard nothing negative, and he continues to be engaged and involved in some of the agenda items and planning for the wrap-up of this council and start of the next council.
Okay, thank you. Next is the committee reports, and I understand that Councilor Littman would like to speak to one of the issues.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Tim. As you may recall, when we passed the budget for the current year, we had identified as one of our priorities improvements to the road infrastructure, and that we had planned a $2.5 million borrowing to support that. manager and finance director have gotten some indicative rates, and I think we're at the point, based on our planning, where we would like to have a finance committee to review our financing options following our next council meeting. And that would be my proposal, to schedule a meeting immediately following the next council meeting.
Okay, and the other two are Councilor Hamel and Councilor Bear, right?
Yes,
After the meeting.
yes, it should be pretty short. We can get some information to you then ahead of time as well.
All right, are there any other committee reports, or none? Okay, let's go to page 16, which is Laconia project update.
You say before or after the meeting?
Immediately following,
Following, okay.
yes.
The city manager bring us up to date on the next item, which is...
Sure. You looking for the manager's report and the project's update?
Yes.
Okay. So you do have the project update in your packet this evening, so the second meeting of the month, we always do the projects update. Road projects are pretty much at the end at this point. All paving is done. The last true construction is we're pouring the final 2 crosswalks down on Lakeside Avenue this week, and that'll wrap up, a couple of punch list items, but all of the major construction is wrapped up once we pour the final 2 crosswalks down there. Very good project, and again, the striping, since we've done the final wearing course, is on there. We'll be doing the stenciling of the numbers for the parking kiosk in the spring. No sense to get those numbers down this time of year when they're just going to weather, so we'll put those down in the spring. But nice project, and the final piece of it is happening this week, and really, again, kudos to the council for supporting it, and all staff and all of our contractors for their efforts, and not only hitting the timeline in the spring for Memorial Day, but coming back in and wrapping it up this fall. Beyond there, we've got a lot of work that's been occurring over the past month or two in the Public Works Department, dealing with our streets, more in assessing road conditions, putting numbers to them, putting a value as to what it would take in one fell swoop to get our roads up to an acceptable condition across the city in 1 year, how we should be planning for strategically over a number of years, and what the investment will need to be made. So Wes Anderson, our Public Works Director, has been working with our pavement consultant. We'll be bringing you a full presentation, most likely, if not at the last January meeting, at the early February meeting, to go over that, and that'll help lead us into the budget season in the spring, as in talking about roads and dollars and what the priorities are and those types of things. And we certainly want the council's input on that as well.
Yes, Councilor.
Yes, just for the public's benefit, am I correct with the 2.5 million borrowing that we're talking about, plus, is it 1.6 million?
Yeah, 1.6, I think it might be a little under 1.6, but
Yep.
close to 1.6.
Roughly 4 million that, as compared to like 1.5 we've been doing.
Yes, and we have the additional fund, should the council choose to use them, from the additional fee for the car registration. And we also have the one-time money that came out of the legislature this year before they closed the books on the prior 2-year budget that came specifically for streets earmarked. So there's definitely a significant amount of money that we want to talk strategizing-wise. We know we're going to do Court Street, begin Court Street major reconstruction as soon as the weather allows in the spring. Beyond there, we'll be making recommendations and talking about how we should tackle the streets with some of that remaining money, but we should be seeing a significant impact in streets next construction season. Where else are we going with that? The dog park project, I think you knew from a couple weeks ago, we got the final easement from the last projects update. We got the final easement with Eversource that we signed off on. We went out for bids on that. We got several proposals that came in that the Happy Tales Dog Park Group is reviewing at this point. Kevin Dunleavy is working as staff support with that, but it's really kind of an outside group that we're partnering with that's taking the lead, so they're reviewing those. Depending on how quickly we come to a decision and where the weather runs, we may be able to be moving some earth. It's not a major project, but you've got to be doing some grading and putting in fences and that type of stuff. So depending on how the weather plays out over the next few weeks, something may occur this fall. More than likely, it's probably going to happen very early in the springtime to be going up there. The windows are replaced here in City Hall. We are waiting for a different crank on the windows. The crank that came with it works well, but it only allows the windows to open a very short distance, and there's a sister crank that fits in the window without any retrofitting or anything that'll go in and allow them to open much wider. And after that's done, we'll finish out with the framing out and the finishing up. But nice job with the windows, and all indications from staff is they feel a lot tighter and less drafty and warm. So that's a good sign there.
I know my window.
And Donna's window especially, she loves that one.
Doesn't work at all, does it?
The holiday parade was held this past weekend, and appreciate the departments supporting that between Public Works, Police Department for, the road blockages, Public Works for setting up some of the barricades and stuff, and didn't feel quite like winter, but I think people would rather be marching and watching a parade in the 50-degree weather range than, I think last year we had rain and very cold, so all in all, a nice job on the parade. We have a preliminary tax rate set. I don't want to get into numbers or anything today, but all indications are we should be finalizing that tomorrow. Once it's final tomorrow, I'll give you the breakdown of the components of what adds up to the final rate. Our hope is to get bills out in the next 2 days, so that we will have a due date for December 29th, whereas the 30th and the 31st are a Saturday and a Sunday, and we definitely want to get the due date out so that folks who escrow their finance companies will get it in this calendar year for them on individual income tax reasons on that, nothing to do with paying the property tax, but by state law, we have 30 days from the date the bills are mailed in order to set that date. So where the timing of the weekend and knowing we want to keep it in this calendar year, we will be making every effort to get them out with a due date for December 29th. And as soon as I get the final breakdown, I'll get that into you by email tomorrow. And with that, I'll take any questions anyone may have.
A couple of items. You went through it, and I'd like to get into the downtown TIF district. There's a lot of activity going on and a lot of things they're looking into. And we on the council, we never hear from the TIF board. I know I'm not going to be here, but it would be nice if quarterly or 6 months, we could have somebody in where we could follow up on some of the things we're picking up in your memo. And very interested in what they're planning on doing, because they mentioned the parking garage and the Colonial. And I think we ought to know some of these things before we get into the budget. Because when you're working on the budget and then you have to make room for something else.
Sure.
But anyway,
So, yeah, we can make sure that happens. I know Pat Wood, who's the chair of the downtown TIF, was
Yeah.
here probably in late August or early September when the downtown TIF advisory board had sent the letter requesting, and I know we've referred that to the Land and Buildings Committee, just a matter of scheduling a time for that committee to start working on it. But even beyond that, we can arrange for more frequent updates from the downtown
well, I
TIF
think the
board.
public likes to
Sure.
hear about it too. The other one is the Weirs Beach restoration. Can you give us a little update on what's going on? It seems to be.
We've been working with our consultant, the Woods Hole Group, and we've got a couple of options. We've been working with folks at DES who are trying to be accommodating. I think the challenge DES is having is they really haven't dealt with a project of this magnitude on this large of a lake before, and they're being a little cautious, and I won't say it's a learning curve for them for the first time, but they want to make sure that whatever the approvals are going to work, and then whatever the fixes are that the city's going to implement are going to stop the erosion and hold the sand. Because what they don't want to have do is just we go in and we dredge and we replenish, and then 5 years later, we're doing the same project again because the stopping erosion fix didn't work the way it was planned to. So they want to look at it comprehensively. We want to see where we can pull the material from. There's hopes that we can pull it from just down the channel, where those who travel that area of the water see that quite a bit of a sandbar has built up not too far at the end of the channel, where it starts to widen out and the current isn't moving as quick at that point. There's a lot of sand being deposited. So we're hopeful, since that was sand that originally came from that area, that we can go and dredge and replenish, in essence, with our own sand. If that's not something that they're going to allow, then we also then need to be sourcing a similar type makeup sand, if that makes sense. So the characteristics of the sand that we replenish the beach with have to be consistent with the type of sand that's there right now. I'm not a sand expert, but there's lots of different kinds of sands, and you just can't go bring some sand. The other area that we're talking with them about, hopefully to do at the same time, is some of the dock spaces closer to shore have also filled in a bit and aren't as user-friendly for medium to larger boats. So again, if we're looking to replenish sand, we know that came from our own beach area, how we can incorporate. So it's from a DES perspective, it's a fairly sizable project and something that they don't come across every day. So everyone's kind of just being very cautious and making sure that the various departments within DES, and that's Department of Environmental Services here at the state level, are all communicating and are all on the same page. So we've had conversations. They're probably going to continue through the winter. I don't know if we'll make something in time for the spring season, but if not, it definitely would be for the fall season. I don't know how much the lake drawdown, the lake gets drawn down every other year. Next year is a lake drawdown year in the fall. I don't know how much that enhances delaying the project till the fall versus doing it in the spring when the water level is lower or not. So I don't know if that's a consideration in there as well or not either.
We've been studying it for 2 to 3 years, and
It's
is this the
it's
first time DES has been involved, rather than the company we were working with before?
No, they've looked at some of the preliminary designs before we invested into
knew
the
all
full
this.
design, and they gave their okay to a couple of the recommendations. So those are the ones that we went and we fleshed out further and invested the full scope of engineering and design with. So those are the ones that are back between DES, and now again, we're having discussions about where we can pull the material from. So not just, maybe extending the jetty or putting in some groins or doing the beach grass or doing some other things. It's now talking about where and how the dredge is going to happen, and those are some of the components that they want to make sure that they get right.
Is the money we appropriated just for the engineering, or have we actually set money aside?
We have set
for-
money aside, and I believe it was $300,000 that was set aside
Right.
above and beyond that. So hopefully, by the end of the winter season, we'll be able to know whether that's fully going to cover the final design, and if not, we obviously will be looking into looking at other sources, whether it's from a dedicated account that can be used for beach improvements, or whether it's something else. But we can see what the number is, and then we can work with the council to bring recommendations forward.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Councilman Whitman.
Speaking of sand, I think we also, based on your recommendation, added some additional money to the budget to take care of Bartlett Beach and some of the other, not the same
Different
magnitude,
beaches.
but to make some improvement in the quality of the beach sand on some of our other
That was
beaches.
separate money,
Yes.
wasn't it?
That was some separate money. I don't have an update on that particular project. I do know that we've gone out to bid for the tennis court and the basketball court resurfacing money. That was done. The bids are in, and we're in the queue for first thing in the spring on those being done, with the bids, being awarded, and we're lined up on that.
Kevin did mention to me today that he had some quotes coming in on the engineering for those projects. And he thought they were coming in less than what was appropriated.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilman.
Did DES not go along with some of the recommendations of Woods Hole?
I think they're still looking at the final work that the Woods Hole Group has done and going through it and making sure that they concur with it, that what was designed as a fix, as a solution, is going to be a long-term fix and not just a Band-Aid approach. So I think they're evaluating it. And again, I don't think they see a lot of these types of projects. When you think about it, there's only one outlet in all of Lake Winnipesaukee, and it runs through the weirs into Paugus Bay. So all of that body of water, when it does move, that's the direction it moves. I, for some reason, thought there was also an outlet down in the tip in Alton, but that's not the case. This is the one. So when you look at a lake that size, and you're looking at flow and where sediment's going to go and how it's going to react, that's why I think DES hasn't necessarily seen something of this scope. Some medium or smaller sized lakes, you can go in and do a dredge, and you don't necessarily have the current and the pull that you do on this one. So I think that's why it's a little bit new to them, and this type of project hasn't been done to this scope right next to the channel, which is a natural draw for the sediment anyway.
Further questions? None? All right. Liaison reports, we don't have any citizen comments to comment on current agenda items. Anybody out there in the audience that would like to speak to the council? Please come forward. I don't see anybody moving. Okay.
We out of here?
Then we have the city manager's report.
That I just gave you. I'm happy to do it again.
I thought you did, but I wanted to make sure you didn't have
I am good.
anything else to?
Nope.
Okay. Project update report. Okay, it's on
Got that too.
page 16 and 19.
You already did that,
Yep, we did that too, so we're all set there.
20.
Now,
Sewer one.
second
20.
half sewer report, 2017 document. You have it in front of you this evening. And the proposed motion would move to approve the 2017 second half sewer warrant. So if anybody has any questions on that right here, now's the time to bring it up.
I just, for the benefit of the public, maybe the
The-
manager could explain why we do this.
Yeah, the sewer warrant is tied into collecting for those accounts that just have sewer only. So if somebody has public water and public sewer, it's billed through the water department. So these are not delinquent accounts or anything like that. This is merely putting out the warrant for the second half of the year for those who just are on sewer only, as we call it in the city, to go out and send the bills and enforce the collection of it.
Okay,
I move that we approve and sign the 2017 second half sewer warrant.
do I have a second? Second by Council Door. Any further questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Passes. Okay, that's the second sewer report. All right, approval of the 2017 legalization of House Bill 316 relative to statewide property tax exemption for commercial and industrial construction. Councilor Lippman.
Thank you. For my fellow councilors, the legislature last session passed House Bill 316, which gives the municipalities one more opportunity to support economic development. And what I'd like to do tonight is introduce what this is, talk about it for a few minutes among ourselves, and then bring it back next meeting, and then give our manager some direction on how we'd like to play this. And assuming we do want to do it, it would ultimately need to be written up and then go through a public hearing process for an adoption. But, you know, I think I'll introduce it by saying this, that I think we've found the TIF districts that we've adopted to be a powerful way to enable the city to put in infrastructure to support economic development. House Bill 316, I think, is, you know, we're at times would like to attract industry to, or additional industry to our community, or even that industry that's here to have them expand here as opposed to go somewhere else. But what this new legislation allows us to do is to exempt, in effect, it's almost like a TIF in the sense that you take a portion of the current taxes. Instead of us collecting money, we would give an exemption for a period of time to incentivize investment. And I think it's important for us as a community, particularly where we have the industrial base in this county, to be proactive in getting this enabling legislation on the books. I think what we need to decide is whether we want all the categories that are in the enabling legislation, this industry as well as commercial. And then secondly is the size and duration of the exemption. So I think at the maximum amount, you can give a 50% exemption, and the exemption is only on the school and municipal portion, not the county portion. And you can give it up to a 10-year period. So, you know, when we look at, you know, some of our largest investments in the city over the last 5, 6 years have been some of the, up on, in the industrial area, we had a pretty significant investment in the industrial park off of Lexington Drive. And I think we want to try to encourage those that are here to make additional investments. And the idea is, I think, by foregoing some property tax revenue and giving an incentive, you get a larger investment than you otherwise would. And I think if we don't do this, we potentially cede this to another area that might wish to do it. And I think since we have the base, it makes sense for us to be proactive and be one of the first municipalities to enact this. And maybe if the manager would like to add to that, again, I'd say that whether we feel like, industrial manufacturing, where we feel that would be the largest bang, or whether we want to extend it to commercial uses, whether we feel we have enough retail. But if you remember, the mayor has pointed out to us, and I think the manager supported that, one of our major, if you will, disadvantages for attracting population and balancing our demographics is that our reliance on the property tax of households compared to industrial or commercial uses, that we're sort of out of balance compared to some of our more nearby neighboring communities.
I think Councilman Lippman did a great job of presenting it. I think if you want to look at the definitions, they're up towards the top of the page in Roman numeral 1. So when we speak to commercial, you're able to use either the state definitions, or if within our zoning regulations we had other definitions we chose to use, we could use ours. But commercial states all uses and includes retail, wholesale, service, and similar uses. So that's pretty broad. That's any type of business, whether it's a sole proprietor tax preparer or a cottage, colony, motel type of thing. I mean, so you're dealing with any type of a commercial establishment. If you skip down 2 lines to industrial uses, that really focuses on the manufacturing, production, assembling, warehousing, or processing of goods and materials for sale. So that's you're typically your larger scale. It doesn't necessarily have to be fully larger scale. It could be a large structure that maybe only has a handful of employees. But that's the definitions between commercial and industrial. So you can choose to do one or the other or both. Whichever ones you include, though, and then as Councilor Lippman said, for a period of up to 10 years in an amount of up to 50% on the local school and the municipal side, it's available to anybody who applies. So it's a little bit different from RSA 79E, which the council adopted a few years ago, in which you can defer some taxes on, property taxes on that as well, but it has to be for a public benefit, and they give some examples of public benefit. This, you can say the benefit is they've put an addition on, or they've built a new structure, or there's potential for creating jobs, but it doesn't have to pass the test of, is it a public benefit? It would so that's just something to think about in your discussions on whether, industrial being a little bit more limited, but maybe a little bit more targeted of where you'd like to go, versus commercial being all encompassing. So that's probably the one key thing to I think to have a conversation about.
I'd also add that in terms of the joint work group between the council and the planning board and developing the land use chapter, I think this is a tool that would complement some of the thinking that's going on there. That committee had Russ Tebow come in and do a presentation recently about what's going on in other major developments in the state and how they're approaching it, and talked about some concepts that I think we can bring back here. But I think this, again, would be something that we could, for example, you have to apply it uniformly, but we could pick a zone that we wanted to apply it to, as opposed to have it go citywide, as an example, if we're trying to encourage development. Is that correct?
No, I think wherever commercial is allowed,
Right.
This would be available. So it couldn't happen in a residential neighborhood.
Correct.
But anywhere in the city where we allow any commercial establishments now, it would run the entire gamut of Court Street, Union Ave, Main Street, down through the Weirs. And again, it could be something as small as somebody putting a one extra office, work area onto an existing building. It could be relatively small, but if it was a commercial type of use, it would qualify versus focusing more on the industrial, which typically would be a larger, either addition to a building or a larger amount of new construction and potentially more jobs as well.
So, if I may, Mr. Mayor, if, in terms of commercial uses, could we, or the planning board or somebody redefine what we mean by commercial uses as far as their availability for these tax incentives? Could we do that? Good question.
It is a good question, and I think whatever definition you're using has to be compatible with your zoning regulations. So I think you'd have to be careful about trying to craft something to carve out certain establishments and say that they aren't a commercial use, when in reality, they are a commercial use. So I think it would be challenging if you were to try to carve commercial to prohibit certain uses from qualifying for an exemption.
I'm not looking to make this more complicated. I'm just wondering what our resources are, because as I understand it, we can use either our definition of what commercial use is or the state definition of what commercial use, and that's our choice in the first instance.
Yes.
But we'd have to make it consistent with whatever we're using in the zoning
The
regulations.
zoning, yes.
Yeah, would have to be consistent with that. I understand that, because as you know, as you're a member of the committee, Councilor Lippman, we are approaching the completion of the land use chapter. And the land use chapter, as it is proposed right now, expressly asks the question, should we be giving consideration to this new legislation in order to attract commercial and/or industrial uses in the city? And I would think that that recommendation may come out of the committee to the planning board in terms of using this legislation, because this proposed legislation could be really beneficial to the city in the long run in a lot of ways over many years. That, the numbers that we have to sort through, is it 50%, is it 35%, is it 10 years, is it 7 years, is it 5 years? That's probably a more difficult immediate question, but there are answers to those questions. And so once we adopt this, or if we adopt this, we're kind of locked and loaded on it for.
Except if you look at item Roman 2, if we elected to start at one place, there's a provision that allows it to be revisited. You can't take away an exemption that you've already given, but you can adopt it for a maximum of 5 years. You have to revisit the process here.
And I think actually you have to do it at least every 5 years. You could choose to do it more frequently than that if you found out that it wasn't working quite the way we did. But Councilor Lippman's right. Whoever's got it grandfathered and implemented, they're locked into the terms that were there when they were approved.
Yes, Councilor Mayor.
While we're thinking about it and coming up with questions, I'm wondering, when you talk about maybe specifying a particular zone, that might be the best possible choice, as I'm thinking of TIF districts. I don't see how we could give tax exemptions in a TIF district, because we're already losing 50% of the tax to the city. And then if we give a tax exemption on top of that, are we gaining, or I just mean, we ought to think about that.
Well, the TIF is the city, so in essence, it's not going into the general fund.
Exactly.
But it's going into a different checkbook within the city. So we're not losing it, it's just going into an account where it has to be reinvested.
On the city.
It has to be reinvested within that district.
Exactly.
But you're right, and similar to when we adopted 79E, I can recall the speaker coming here and saying, well, if someone buys a building for $200,000 and they're gonna put some improvements in that have a public benefit, but we're not gonna tax them at their new value of $500,000 for a period of 5 years, that limits the new money coming into the TIF. And the answer is, yes, for a short period of time, but the value is you've created a public benefit, you've got jobs, you've got an investment in a building, hopefully that will spur others. And then you're kind of, it's just a short-term delay until that full value comes online. So a similar thing here, it's just, it's a different tool. TIFs are typically for, specific neighborhoods or districts. This would be citywide, so I think wherever a commercial use is allowed in the zone, that would apply if that was adopted. Wherever an industrial use is, we don't have industrial uses right on Union Ave or on Court Street because they're not zoned for that. So industrial is in, 3 or 4 locations around the city, whereas commercial is across the board, almost everywhere, but true dedicated RR1 and 2 and single family.
Any more questions?
Well, just a comment to follow up on Brenda's remark, because if you think about it, if we don't adopt this and some new project comes online, we'll get all that new money. But I don't see any new projects coming online without some incentives. And if whatever ratio we adopt, we'll still be getting whatever percentage rate of new money coming into the city, money that we didn't have before.
Correct.
That we'll now be getting over a period of 5, 7, 10 years, and then we'll be getting the benefit of the full tax rate. So,
I think it's really a tool to take advantage of, and I know we have to calibrate it to meet competing interests, but I think you're right in that, the fact that a business can, or an industry can make an investment here as opposed to going somewhere else to do it. I mean, I think we were fortunate, is it Lewis and Saunders, not Lewis and Saunders, that relocated back from Concord to here?
Avid.
Avid Engineering. I mean, that'd be a great example is, there are other industrial entities in our city where they have a choice to expand, whether it be in, Laconia, or they could go to Concord, or they could go to Peterborough, or wherever. And I think, I'd rather forego a certain amount to retain them and retain the jobs locally. I think in the long run we'll be better off.
And I think just one other thing, when you're considering the number of years and the percentage, put yourself in a developer's shoes for a minute. They want to get their return on investment or their credit back on a tax break as quickly as possible. So rather than doing a smaller percentage over the maximum 10-year period, you may want to think about doing something that's a little more aggressive on the percentage, but do it over a shorter period. So when you're talking to a developer, you can say, well, here's a 3-year look, or here's a 5-year look. Sometimes you get out to the 10 years and, that doesn't do it for them anymore.
Yes, Councilor Ham.
Scott, is the percentage where it says not to exceed 50, so that's a range of 0 to 50 and what we can select on
Yes.
that? And then the years is 1 to 10?
Yep.
Okay.
And again, it's just on the local portion, so it's the local school and the municipal part, not the state education and the county part. It's still the lion's share, where today's tax rate is still probably about $18 of our 22 and change tax rate that would apply to this.
In about mid-portion of that paragraph, in the section 2, it says increase in assessed value attributed to construction of new structures. Now, does this have to be, does this refer to a company that's here to build new buildings, or additions, renovations, or whatever? Or is it also included a new company coming into town?
It could be new construction. It could be a new company coming in and taking over an existing building, and then they
But I mean,
renovate or put an addition on.
It, from what I'm reading here, it doesn't refer to a new business coming into, or new company coming into town, buying a piece of land and building a brand-new complete plant that
Yeah,
was never
it
here.
absolutely does. That would be new construction. So whatever the base value is, if somebody came in and just bought some vacant land and the land was worth $200,000 on our assessment right now, and if they constructed something and now is worth $2 million, we would base the new value at 1.8 million. So the 200,000 already was in that assessed value for the raw land. Now it's assessed at 2 million, 1.8 is the net gain. If there was an existing warehouse of 5,000 square feet and somebody added 2,000 square feet addition to it, you'd start with a baseline of what the property was worth before they put the addition on, and then what the captured amount that they would be allowed for the tax break on is only the amount above that that shows up in the assessment. So it would be minus any existing structure and any existing land values that were already there. But it would be new construction, it could be an addition, it could be a renovation if the renovation was substantial. I think if somebody was just moving some partitions and putting in new flooring, I doubt that would add a lot to our overall assessed value to it. So it's talking about, something significant, not just
So it kind of follows our TIF model.
Yes.
similar in that, yeah. Except it limits it just to industrial, commercial, whereas a TIF could be residential property within there that added an addition or did something.
So would
capture
this
that.
also include someone that wants to, like up on the boulevard there off White Oaks Road, build a cluster development? That's not considered commercial though, is it?
No, if it was, has to
So
be,
that-
has to be retail service, so that's why the
Yeah,
definition is
so
important.
that wouldn't apply to this,
Correct.
those type of
Right,
construction?
wouldn't be, if it was just residential, it wouldn't. If there was a commercial component to it, if they had a cluster development that had 80 houses, but they had kind of one of those little village centers, and they had a bank and a drugstore and a
That portion would-
grocery, that portion was, so strictly commercial or
If I
industrial.
wanted to add on to my business.
Yeah, or someone, like Council Doyle's got a cottage colony, if they were gonna add additional units that are there for rent, then that is an addition to a commercial property.
No further questions? All right, let's move on.
You need that motion?
Do we need that motion now?
I asked that we just put it on the agenda for next.
So we'll just move it next week, and if you can come forward with your thoughts, basically it's three questions, the industrial and/or commercial, the amount of years up to 10, and the amount of the break up to 50%. And if we get consensus for that at the next meeting, we'll start the formal process at our meeting on the 26th, then we'd have a public hearing and a vote at the first meeting in January if we chose to.
Okay.
Is there an opportunity to get some feedback or some more information by the next meeting?
I can get feedback on anything you'd like, I just need the questions.
Well, you know.
I don't need them tonight, but if somebody has questions they want additional information on, I'm happy to do that.
Well, I think I already asked you, I don't think that another community has adopted this yet, is that right?
I'm not aware. I think originally this was set up for some legislation, I believe, over in Claremont, that it was specific to Claremont, and questions came about why aren't we making this enabling legislation across the state? So I think Claremont may have it, but I think years ago, a lot of times legislation just went in for a community and whatever, and now the state's trying to say, if we're putting something in, let's put all communities on equal footing. So I'm not aware of anybody who's adopted it since the legislation passed and became law.
Well, I'll just tell you what my concerns are, and we can follow this up on discussions and or whatever. My concerns are, what's the time period that we should be looking for? What is optimal? Do we want to be aggressive in terms of how much of a tax break we're going to give them? And does a shorter term in that mode make sense in terms of trying to really attract new businesses and industries? I mean, we've had 79E on the books for how long?
Probably at least 4 years.
And have we had any takers?
We have not. I can answer that question tonight. Obviously, I think the more aggressive and the more attractive you make the package look to a developer, as I said a few minutes ago, if someone's got to wait 10 years to get their money back in smaller increments versus being able to see something sizable over 3 years, that's going to be an attention grabber. If you can say, look, 36 months and, year 1, year 2, year 3, you're getting a piece of your investment back. That's obviously a more attractive package in my mind to a developer than dragging it out over a longer period.
Yes, Council Lippman.
I guess the other thing too, in terms of one of the things I think as a council we've tried to do over a number of years is to repackage the ease of doing business in the city, and we're going to be introducing, hopefully, later this year, the new land use chapter. I think, trying to create a new image for how easy it is to do business here, you know, around this type of set of issues. I think it sort of really complements introducing that land use chapter to have this tool as part of that.
Yeah, I agree.
So we'll just keep this, we don't have to table it tonight, it's just there for discussion, but we will bring it back again in 2 weeks, and if there's consensus, then again, 2 weeks after that, we will start the process of the first reading, public hearing, moving, that type of stuff.
Okay. Next item is discussion regarding upgrading the Court Street, Guilford Avenue, and Busy Corner traffic lights to countdown lights. One of Councilor Hamels would like to speak to.
Sure. Recall last meeting, I started to make a motion about including the upgrades to the cross signals only at 3 of our intersections as part of the construction projects for the years that are coming due. And I'd still like to see that happen. I guess West came up with a figure of what each intersection would estimate cost of upgrading to be. And does everybody have that packet?
Yeah.
Okay. So you went over it. I'd still like to see that become part of the construction projects for when, we do Court Street next year. Court made the cross.
Maybe I'm getting this wrong, but I thought that the memo in terms of the upgrades at Church and Main and Guilford, those estimates were just the ADA improvements. I didn't understand it to be the actual costs of installing. Maybe I'm wrong about this. The cost of putting in and
What I was looking for was a cost of replacing the lights to a countdown light.
yeah,
Instead of just the
I
hand.
understand that.
Yeah.
Does these numbers include the cost of those lights, or is it
Let's-
just
let's-
the ADA improvements?
Let's get the
Those should be
Public
the
Works
lights.
Director up here and explain it.
When you go to upgrade from the existing pedestrian signals, the hand ones, the countdown timer, that's an upgrade. That kicks in the requirement to put in all the ADA piece. So the countdown timers are included as part of that, but so is all the acoustic of the chirper devices and all the adjustments that we have to make then where the push buttons are and where the platforms are to support that upgrade.
So this is the total cost?
Correct.
All right. I didn't understand that. That's what
So
I
it's the
was getting.
complete pedestrian-friendly ADA
Okay.
component. We can't just go in and do a countdown without doing the other pieces if we're making an upgrade, and that's in the federal law. So if we go in to upgrade one piece, we need to do the entire package. And as Wes said, sometimes we've got to move where a button is because you can't have someone who's limited with their mobility and looking to cross over this way, make a move over here to go push the button if it's too far away. You've got to make things in the appropriate locations for a disabled person. So that's why when you brought it up 2 weeks ago, I wanted to make sure that we had the language of the federal law and that you were aware of the cost, because, it's not that we can't find $60,000, in the budget, but 60,000 is not a insignificant number. We've got, plenty of line items in the budget that are 20 and 30 and 40,000 for guardrails and sidewalks, and that's citywide. So all of a sudden, if it's just, it's only 60, and then next year it's only 50, and it's only 50, you put it together and it's a couple $100,000 almost, venture. So if this does, and we're supportive of doing it, we certainly can find the money within what we've got available for the Court Street portion. I probably would be including the two $50,000 numbers in appropriate budgets in the following years, just so that they're there and itemized, because,
Yep.
you start
Well, I
taking-
mean, the Union and Main Street intersection, that's going to be done next year,
Correct.
and that could be part of that budget for in July, when we pass that budget.
We'll have to
And
look at the
those
timing.
upgrades could be done in the fall.
Yeah, we'll have to look at the timing to it, but
Yeah,
yes.
so
but-
anyway, I just think where we've had, some pedestrians hit by cars in the crosswalk lately, granted, some of them may not always been the car's fault, I could say. But I just think whatever we can do to improve the safety of people crossing, especially at Court and Main, where the high rises there with the elderly people. It takes them a little longer to get across, and cars just don't stop anymore, you know, and I think our police department should make that a focus of their patrolling, because it's just the other day, I was coming out down Court, it's a story, coming down Court Street, waiting at the light, they all turn to walk, and here's a car in the left-hand turn lane right here on the end of the street. When all the things were said walk, she just went right across the intersection and turned on Union Avenue and headed north. You know, so people are not obeying things, and I just think whatever we could do to make things a little safer, upgrade those things, it would make sense. I mean, Concord have done them with the countdown lights that work. I've been to Concord several times, and cars just seem to wait till a number goes down to 0 before they turn, instead of the flashing hand, and they want to turn whenever they want. Half of them are still on the phones anyway, so they don't pay attention to begin with. But I just think, you know, we could pick the one at Union in Maine to do next year.
Yep. No, I agree with you. I agree with everything you've said, and I think the more safety we can implement, it's better for the community. It's just, this is the kind of decision-making and prioritizing that helps me get from the council, because then we incorporate it into budgets and present budgets that represent what it is that's important to you and the community in general. So this is helpful for us.
And then, as Wes said, I mean, they come all different ways. And down in Maryland, they even talk to you, you know, you press the button, it says, don't walk.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and they got the chirping ones, and that's for people with, you know, their eyes may not be quite as good as,
Yes.
so.
We'll, if this is approved, then we will work this into the appropriate budgets going forward as we address those intersections.
Council Lippman.
New Hampshire has a right-of-way, pedestrian right-of-way law, and we used to mention it all the time and promote it all the time. I never see a sign about that anymore. You go to Concord, and it's very, very often used, and it's very effective.
Yeah.
And it is a state law.
Is that the one that says yield to pedestrians in the crosswalk? Or are you talking about something else?
There's one near Opeachy Park that's.
Yeah, but but there used to be that it was always out there telling you that the pedestrian had the right-of-way in the right-of-ways. And you don't see that much around town anymore. I was very aware of it years ago, but now you don't see it, so you forget it.
We can take a look. And I also want to say, it's, as I think as Councilor Hamel brought up, there's some responsibility on the part of the pedestrians to wait for the signals and cross at the appropriate places. And in some cases, people are walking and have their face buried in the phone, or the earphones are on, and they're oblivious to what's going on around them. So it's got to be all the way around that the pedestrians and bicyclists are paying attention to the rules of the roads from their end as well.
Council Lippman.
Just a couple quick questions on the estimates. Look at these as sort of budgetary quotes, not
Correct.
level of detail. And then I guess the other thing is, informational for me, is if when we go to do an intersection, we could include this in a comprehensive bid. In other words, if we're gonna be paving and doing everything, can this be part of a comprehensive bid package, or does this have to be a specialty item that you have to separately contract for?
We may get a better price if we do multiple signals, because it's really a separate type of subcontractor versus the a paver or whatever.
So,
But, if we're doing, say, we do Union, Busy Corner, and Guilford all in that same contract, then we're gonna get,
Better price.
yeah, we'll get better prices at that piece.
so sometimes when we've done other projects, we've done ad-alts, so we could maybe bid all three with a specific schedule.
We
Right,
can look.
It's a whole different level of expertise to do that instead of digging water pipe and sewer. And
We can look at some options on, hey, if funding is available, it's going to be this as the base, but there's the possibility to do B and C, and we can see how the bids come in on 1 versus 3 and where the funding is, and look at some options that
Well,
way.
we could, as Henry says, we could do, go out to bid on Court and Main, and then do ad alternates of Busy Corner.
Right,
and-
because if
and
someone's
Guilford Ave.
mobilized and knows they're going to get several weeks of work here, they're going to sharpen their pencil a little bit more than knowing they're just coming in and doing one.
Okay.
So this motion should do all three of them.
Yes, and we'll coordinate it as funds and timing of the projects, but I think, yes, this would give us the direction that this is a priority for the council, that as we move forward, that we want to address these 3 intersections.
Yes, Counselor Hamel.
So I'd like to make a motion to move to upgrade the Court Street, Guilford Ave, busy corner traffic lights to countdown lights when the road improvements are occurring in those areas.
Second by Counselor Bear. Any further question?
And so basically, this is a directional,
Yes.
as opposed to a budget authorization at this point.
All in favor? Raise your hand.
Aye.
Opposed?
I have
I
a
know there's-
quick question for Wes while he's there.
Joe?
Busy corner intersection, wasn't that going to be changed to a camera
Yes,
intersection?
working with the contractor now to get his crew in to do that work.
Okay, great. Thanks, Wes.
We think what happened is right after the storm we had a few weeks back, a lot of damage happened on traffic signals, and there were higher priorities that some of these contractors had than coming in and doing new work. We actually we were kind of in the queue a couple of weeks ago on this, and that storm prioritized, as it should have.
Should have, yeah, exactly. Okay.
Thank you. The younger generation goes by quotes, you know, stop means spin tires on pavement. So that's why they're doing what they're doing. So we gotta correct that somehow. All right, now, unfinished business. The state report, ordinance 2017-140-06 PDF. Ordinance 2017-149-06, Fire Emergency Fire Department, page 28 and 40. Yes.
I think we asked to, this was presented to us last meeting by Chief, and just because it's a significant issue, we wanted to leave it open for a meeting. I don't see anybody here that's probably gonna speak to it.
We did put information out on the internet. They had information available at the fire station. I know the chief indicated to me that he had at least one individual come in who was a smaller landlord type of thing with some 4, 6, 8, 10-unit apartments, and just was verifying that this did not apply to him, and it doesn't. Planning department certainly was aware of it, that we were seeking more feedback, and we've got no additional comments, concerns, other than that one landlord on several buildings who it doesn't apply to.
If that person that came in and speak to the chief, that said he was probably grandfathered,
It's not retroactive.
okay, so if he does major upgrades, then it would be? No, okay.
It would not apply to him because he's multifamily. This would strictly apply to cluster developments and planned unit developments, which is where they take a parcel of land and leave a parcel of land open and then put the properties in close together. So he's a multifamily dwelling. If he actually redid a multifamily dwelling, he's already regulated anyways.
Yes.
I'd move to adopt.
I think we probably need to pull this off the table first,
Okay,
or put it back on the table.
I'll make a motion to take, put it back on the table, ordinance 2017-149-06.
I'll second that.
Second? All in favor? Aye. Motion carries.
And I'd make a motion now that's off the table, on the table again, rather, to pass and adopt ordinance 2017-149-06, an ordinance amending chapter 149, fire prevention and emergency medical services.
So
Do I have a second? Counselor Hamel? Any further questions? None? Signify by saying aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Motion carries. I don't see anything else on this agenda. We hit the bottom.
I think you were going to speak to an event that's kicking off on Thursday night, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I was, on the council comments, I just want to announce that Christmas Village is complete. I'll know after 10 o'clock tomorrow morning whether we pass all the inspections, because that's when the fire department's coming in. So they'll be there, and hopefully everything will be a go for Thursday evening at 6 p.m. And we invite everybody. We're going to do it one more year. I don't know how many more after this one, but anyway, we're going to go as long as we can. So it's all complete as I speak, so I hope to see the people come out. It looks like it's gonna be good weather, except for Friday night. I believe we're gonna have some rain or something, but anyway, they come out in the rain, and we were more than welcome to come. It's a lot of work, and we're pretty happy with what we come up with, so please turn out, and we'll go from there.
So, you guys deserve a lot of credit and praise. So what I want to do is ask you, how many years is this? And isn't that remarkable?
43.
43 years of Christmas Village in the city of Laconia. Congratulations.
The number of hours that
Oh,
this takes to put how many weeks do you guys work on this?
well,
4 weeks.
4 weeks. But it isn't the amount of weeks, it's how many show up.
That's why it's taking longer and longer to set up.
You're still getting good crowds for this,
Oh,
aren't
we
you?
get good
Well,
crowds,
we
but,
get good crowds, but not good crowds to set it up, let's put it that way.
there's only 3, 4 of us at the most that's put that thing together, and
Well, kudos to Christmas Village.
it's,
We're all getting old.
that's for sure. Yep, so anyway, you're all welcome to come, doesn't cost anything, unless you want a picture taken at the end with your children, and that's very inexpensive. So, hope to see you
And
there.
donations are greatly appreciated.
Yes, that's for sure. And hope that you all come out and make it, because 4 days of showing, we also show it to the elderly and to the handicapped that are on wheelchairs that come in special hours on Saturday and Sunday in the morning, for those people to come in with their wheelchairs and stuff, so they don't interfere with the regular people as the show goes on, so. But anyway, come whenever you can, and we'll be there with the doors open. And there's plenty of nice stuff in there, so if I don't have any further items to come before the council, do I have a motion? I guess we don't have to adjourn anymore. So we'll see you all later. Have a good evening.
I guess it's adjourned.
Yeah, we don't have to make a motion.